So, Carl, how was your week?
It was pretty good. How about you?
I'd like to say that there'd be a nice, quiet week where we say security, nothing's happening, and everybody's good.
Never happened.
I feel bad every time I put in our channel, oh, this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening. I'm like, wow, my newsfeed is dark. It's just crazy cyber stuff all the time.
Or it's just accurate.
I know.
Yeah, death rays and lasers and sites going down and data leaked. And
Lions and tigers and bears, oh my.
you know what the worst part of it is, though? When I go and talk to my wife, and I'm super giddy. When these things come out, I'm like, oh my God, there's this great zero day that just came out that affects everyone. And she's like, what is your problem? Like, what is wrong with you?
That's not good
did
news.
you ever watch Modern Family?
Yes. Yeah.
So remember Claire, every time someone died, she would start smiling and laughing.
Exactly. That's me with cyber. When an entire, continent is dropped, I get giddy.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. I guess this is going to be like pick on Microsoft Day.
Yes.
Don't you think? Yeah.
It's been pick on Microsoft the last 3 months, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They're big enough to take it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can handle it. All right, guys, let's get going. Hey. What are you doing? Who are we picking on this week?
I vote Microsoft.
I vote Microsoft. They're the safe bet.
They're big enough to take it.
Jeez.
They are.
They can't catch a break.
It comes with being the industry leader and being in the market for multiple decades of service to people and humanity.
No software maker that we talk about on this show is an innocent victim.
Nope. They have had a really rough time, honestly. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they develop a space laser and nuke a continent somewhere to take all the pressure off of their software issues.
I think it's been a confluence with issues.
A confluence of issues. Oh, that's a different company.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a really good segue into our first story, Patrick. You did that on purpose.
Microsoft can pay me later.
Try and take the heat off them.
So this is one of the only stories this week that isn't about Microsoft, although the last one is you want to stick around because your IP address might be listed in it. You're going to want to
carry
check
the lead.
Yeah, I know. I like it.
Yeah. Stick around. You gotta wait till the end of the show for that. Oh, that was the sound of millions of people skipping to the end.
Well, if you're the 4 people that stayed with us, welcome.
Right. 4. We doubled since last week. All right. Confluence. What's Confluence?
Confluence is a wiki that at Atlassian. A Wikipedia kind of thing.
A wiki. So an editable document.
Yes, a repository for knowledge and things and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they Confluence. I've used it. I've used it many times in different companies.
Yep.
And it's handy. It lets you create web pages like Wikipedia. You could create your own personal Wikipedia, and so companies use it for their own knowledge base, their facts, their frequently asked questions, those kinds of things. It's handy.
Yep.
Super editable, lots of syntax, lots of stuff, and it's been hacked.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have an internal Confluence, not accessible, you hackers.
Yes.
Where we'll keep information on latest and greatest breaches and hacktivity we have internal and 0 days we develop and that sort of stuff.
So have you noticed any strange posts lately on your wiki?
No, we have, but most of them are from employees, so it's understandable.
So let's let people understand. By having it be on our network only, it's like having a garage that doesn't, having a car in the garage that doesn't lock, but the garage locks.
Right.
So it's on our private network. You can't get to it. So even if it was vulnerable, and it is patched, by the way, it is, right?
Yes.
There's a patch available.
Hyper patched. Well, and it's interesting. So, so let's get down to the bug. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So for those of you who love tracking CVEs, which is the common vulnerability that explains, gives you a number that you can search on the internet. This is CVE-2021-26084 remote code execution on Confluence.
Holy Holy crap. Does that mean that in 2021 there have been 26,084 events?
So it's a slow year.
Hopefully that first digit doesn't become an A.
Maybe next year. Maybe next year. So this one's interesting. This is an injection. So for those of you who have listened to this podcast or have a lot of security podcasts or have seen the OWASP top 10 at any point in time over the last 2 decades.
It's a good list to watch.
It is a good list to watch. I heard the new top 10 list is out, but I got to go check it out. So an injection is where developers will, write some code that takes potentially input from users and then we'll run that in some way. So SQL injection for a database would be.
Well, what it means is that the code is copied remotely into some other computer or device, and then that device or computer executes that code. Like it's not code that they execute in their hacker lair. Excellent.
There's plenty of that code. So what's interesting about injections is a developer might, for example, on a website expect you to type in your username and password. And instead, we talked about this before, you type in special database characters instead of your username. And when you go to run it, if it's a poorly written database query from a developer, that will run as code and it won't be searching for your username. And that's an injection. This is at the heart of it is also an injection. But it is an injection in what is called the OGNL language interpreter. The OGNL.
Okay.
Or the
something else you never heard of.
The Object Graphic Navigational Language. Basically.
Original gangster.
Yeah. Original gangster from New London.
There you go. That's Carl.
Well played.
You, Carl.
That's me. That's my language.
So basically, this is leveraged by sites to set properties of Java objects, just to distill it down to sort of its simplest settings.
In other words, change things in memory.
Yeah. So you have an object, you have a thing that you're using to display data. You might use OGNL to change the type font or the whatever of the object that's displaying that data.
Right. I hear the eyes rolling back in their heads. Hopefully that it doesn't really matter. Just it's code. Objects are code.
Let's dig into the very specifics now. So in this particular one, this is not an injection that your normal users are going to do. This is not something that a user is going to type something accidentally on the Confluence site. No, they execute this exploit that then runs code across your entire site.
Okay.
This is very highly crafted. That's one of the reasons I wanted to mention all of what this is doing in the background, because if you see on your Confluence servers activity like this, it is absolutely a hack. It's not a normal thing.
Okay.
So it's interesting. So this is an injection that is an RCE. We all remember what an RCE is.
Remote code execution.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some of the exploits you'll see, we'll post some links. There's a really fantastic tech write-up by Arut X Harsh that goes through pulling the quick patch that came down apart and figuring out how to execute this particular injection, where this person literally pops up calculator on the remote server because you can run whatever you want. Calculator, remote shells.
Wow.
So let's back this up a second.
Sure.
Let me ask the what I think is the defining question, and the thing that a lot of people are sitting here and, as we said, rolling their eyes and saying, "I don't understand what the hell's going on." Every one of these CVEs has a level of difficulty, a severity rating, but they don't have a level of how many people could actually pull it off, right? So if you watched Ocean's 11. Then that, you need an acrobat who can do a double flip from a sitting position kind of, there's all sorts of crazy things that are needed to pull off some, exploits, some heists.
Right.
And the same is true with technical stuff. So there are some things that are like, oh yeah, you just type in the right symbol and the system opens up and does what you want. That's what you were talking about. This isn't that kind of thing. It's not where, if you just add 15 zeros and say Candyman in the mirror 5 times, it happens. You shouldn't do that. So we have to understand that there's exploits that are easily exploitable by, anybody who reads a recipe book. And there's ones that require a lot of code and a lot of mastery. And could a nation state do it? Yeah, absolutely. Every nation state's going to exploit it. But your neighbor's probably not going to, and your favorite stalker is not going to probably do it. And the script kiddies can't do it until somebody turns it into a script for them.
All right.
And so we should think about, every time we talk about one of these things, talking about, what kind of resource, what kind of technical expertise would it take at this time to exploit it? And I think the answer to this one is it would be difficult. It's not easy for the average human, even techie, to replicate this exploit, correct?
So what does it mean, though, for the average Joe? This doesn't seem like something I have to worry about if I'm just sitting in my office running Windows or a Mac.
Well, no. So for the average Joe, really what you need to worry about is if you or your organization is running Confluence and it's not patched right now.
Yeah. And the Confluence needs to be on the internet because that's where the remote activity comes from. Unless it's an inside job, but chances are that's not going to happen, right?
I think the first wave of attacks for this is going to be 2 things. One is if a nation state was trying to get into some place, they're going to quickly weaponize this and try it.
Yeah.
And if a ransomware syndicate, and there's a lot of them, wants to expand their reach, they're going to target this as a way to get your server that runs Confluence to now run their ransomware and infect your environment.
Okay.
So you do need to care about it because if your company gets infected by ransomware, it gets worse real quick.
Yeah.
And but those are sophisticated actors. They're not, again, the script kiddie or the neighbor or, the person who is mad that you didn't take them on a second date. But it's still something that could affect, the rest of the world. But it's more, those kinds of actors as opposed to the lower level actors.
All right. Is it time to move on to the Microsoft issues?
Yes, but one last thing while you guys were chatting, I just did a quick Google search for people running Confluence under the version you should be running, non-patched. And I got
10,000,
8 pages of results, almost 4,000 results.
Okay, less than I thought.
So that means there are 4,000 Confluence servers out there that are patched?
Findable via Google, not just out there.
Not hidden, just Google findable, non-patch Confluence. This one's important. I mean, to the point where, if I remember correctly, the DoD and Homeland and CENTCOM and U.S. Cyber Command all came out and said, if you haven't patched, you need to patch now. This actually came out Friday, and they were saying, yay, long weekend, but you don't get one if you're in security. Please go patch right now. Right. It's that bad.
Patch.
This is called a Google dork.
Would you call me?
I did. You heard me. So there's one of the things in hacking is called Google dorks, and it's basically a way to use Google to find targets. And there's been thousands of them. I'm sure some of them are deprecated and no longer work, but there's lots of ways to use Google to search for victims. And so, in my opinion, that's kind of like, I don't need to outrun the bear. I just need to outrun you.
Yeah.
So one of the things you might want to do is do a search for your domain along with the Google dorks to make sure that you're not showing up as a victim.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to talk about that. We have another list coming at the end of the podcast that will help you see if you're a victim as well, which is kind of nice.
So
the second clue has dropped.
Victim lists.
There's a Cisco vulnerability I heard about that lets you log in as an administrator, but I think it's more of an enterprise infrastructure, so I don't think it affects most people.
Yep, and that's the one I think you're talking about the one we talked about last week. So yeah, so the risk on that is low because it's internal.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but it's still, and it's patchable, etc. And the moral of most of these stories are make sure you're patched, make sure you're up to date, because the Cisco one, along with this Confluence one, there are patches out there that help block these things.
I mean, if there were the three top things that you could do to not be a headline and not be a casualty, won't guarantee you your protection, but the three best things would be have backups, really put some time and energy into having good backups. Don't use older systems that are, not patchable for security anymore, and actually patch on a timely basis. If you do those three things, you're outrunning a lot of the mass of people. You're probably doing better than the average.
Yeah, I won't find you on a Google search, which is good.
Hopefully. That's true. That's true.
All right, on to Microsoft. What's Exchange anyway?
Yes. So there's a couple of Microsoft things this week. First off, there's still some proxy logon. I know we talked about this proxy shell vulnerabilities in Exchange. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago.
We did?
If you're still not patched, shame on you. Shame.
So Microsoft Exchange, typically, it started as a sort of do everything communications thing. But then, when the world sort of standardized on SMTP, POP3, IMAP, email, it just became a big email server. But they use it for other things too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a big collaboration platform, if you will.
Right.
The problem being, there's a lot going on there and there's a lot to try and secure. So any small way of weaseling your way in is going to give you access to some of the largest corporations in the world. And this particular one, where we were talking about the proxy shell vulnerability a couple weeks ago, has 3 CVEs tied to it. I won't read them off. We can put the link in the show notes.
They weren't listening to us.
Nope. Weren't patching. And now, potentially, if that's the case and you have not patched, there's been a big push to push down the Ragnarok ransomware. So all different types of ransomware are now being pushed down through this, through this exploit.
And so they won't have to patch their server. They'll have to restore it from backup.
Right. Yeah. So that's a benefit, I guess. So there was a Bleeping Computer yet again. Actually, it's one of the sites I really like, honestly.
It's a good one.
They're really good at keeping on the pulse of cyber. And other things, but they have an article talking about now the new target is to drive ransomware down, so patch, and patch.
Yeah.
And backup.
And by the way,
patch. And backup. So the last big ransomware I looked at, was an incident that I won't name the people, but they actually stopped it. They actually had an Emotet, infection.
Which is?
Emotet's a ransomware. That's a pretty nasty ransomware. And they managed to stop it because what the Emotet and some of the other programs that were running, the malwares that were running, were on a delay for 666 hours. So it was almost a month. Oof. And the reason they did that is so that they could keep jumping to other systems. So they'd infect the system, and when the person brought the laptop home, it would use the Wi-Fi to jump to their spouse or kid's computer so they could affect the school system and their spouse's work. And it's a pretty nasty, pernicious thing. And this company was really good at catching it and preventing it. And the ransomware never went off. They diffused the bomb before it went off.
Which is not normal.
It is not normal. No, it is. Usually people don't find out the ransomware is there until
the bomb goes off.
And the reason I bring that up though is because I talked about backup, and backup's not as simple as have a backup. You need to have a backup. And you need to make sure that you go far enough back so that you can find a backup that's not contaminated. And then you also need it to be offline so that it can't be contaminated once it's written. So backups, something I'm starting to stomp my feet about a lot more. Patching's very important. Patching's critical, but backup is equally, for when you miss.
So this Exchange ransomware thing is, the news is that the ransomware operation was found, right? They got caught.
It's being seen. It's being seen to be used for that purpose. Basically, when an exploit gets released, it's a 0 day until it's announced. We talked about 0 days.
Right.
Now it's an exploit in the wild, and we wait to see if who and if an exploit gets developed. So, for example, organizations like ours have we sometimes will take the time to build an exploit if we are worried about verifying, that we've been able to remedy a problem. In other words, it's good to have a way to actually try the attack so that we can make sure we've defended against it properly. Okay. Now, the bad guys also want to have the attack, but they want to use it to deploy the ransomware, steal data, do all these things. And so these organizations, there's all sorts of organizations, and Microsoft runs a pretty big one. They watch, and they have honeypot computers out there. And those honeypot computers, they watch to see what is being done to them. They leave a computer that's out there that's unpatched with a specific patch missing. And they say, oh, well, we've noticed that we're getting ransomware on these. And so we can report with confidence that ransomware networks are now using this exploit to deploy their ransomware.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing.
And the ransomware market, if you will, is really weird right now. So like the Ragnarok ransomware, they've shut down operations, and it looks like they've released their master key for decryption for some reason. There's another ransomware network that leaked their source code. And at this point now, we're expecting a lot more ransomware as a service applications, because that code will be reused and repurposed and changed. So
because people with far less experience and capability can now take that code and make it their own.
Sure. Yep.
So why do you think that is, that these guys are sort of giving up or throwing their hands up? Do you think they are moving on to more pernicious things, or do you think they're worried about getting caught, or has the landscape changed for these criminals?
I'll give my opinion. I think that in some cases it's just they have somebody in their midst that rage quit their organization and decided to, release the keys or release the code, or they got hacked. They're not invulnerable. They can get hacked too.
Sure.
The disgruntled employee, isn't that like level 2 on your pyramid?
It is actually, yeah. It's pretty high up there.
It'd be sad if you're a disgruntled employee at a ransomware company.
I personally am very gruntled.
You are.
So
I know that about you.
So, they can get hacked too. They have computers. They don't always secure them as well. The cobbler's kids have no shoes. And they get sloppy. They think that because they're hackers, no one will touch them. It's not the way it works.
All right, let's move on to consumer Windows problems. This is a malware, a malware campaign of a Windows 11 Alpha attachment. Obviously, that's an email attachment. What happened?
Yeah, I think this is just people trying to convince people that they can see Windows 11 in order to get them to download. Yeah. It's a Trojan horse.
It's just another Microsoft Word attachment that you should never click on.
Yeah. If you get something that you don't expect, especially from someone you don't know, but even from someone you know, you shouldn't open it until you have a conversation to talk to them about that.
Yes.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of the convenience out of email, but that's the world we live in.
Well, it was funny. Right. I was telling my wife that just this week. Because I was talking about the next thing we'll talk about, which is the 0-day bug for MS HTML. But I was talking about how these things are delivered over Office documents, and she was like, "Okay, so should I never open an Office document?" And I was like, "Well, within reason, right?" For example, if my mom sent me an email with an Office document, I don't care what it said, I wouldn't open it. And it's not because I assume that her system is malicious.
It's because she's a hacker.
Yeah, right. Of course.
Yep.
That's how hacker babies are made. No, so she, it's in the history of my mom sending me emails, I've never once received an Office document from her. So I wouldn't expect to receive one and then go, oh yeah, this is really cool. She sent me a Word doc today, and then try and open it.
But she just sent you source code, right?
Yeah, which makes total sense. Yeah.
Was it last week we were talking about the AT&T text messages that, congrats to 2 lucky winners, including you, click here to arrange delivery, or was that because I got a lot of these messages and my wife did as well this week.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Means we're all out there.
Wow. You guys won too?
We must be
Wow.
We're apparently the two of the three of us.
I decided to pay it forward by not clicking on it.
Oh, that's nice. He sent it to a friend. Good for you.
I did.
You're like, you know what I want you to have this.
Here's another good one. Walmart Retail Security Recruitment pays you $500 per survey. View this link for more details.
So it's kind of like the movie Elf. Did you ever see the movie Elf? When you find gum on the subway, it's not free gum.
It's not free candy. No. Not so much. It comes with its own
diseases.
Yeah, exactly. Its own malware.
All right. So the moral of this story is don't click on Word docs in your email or any Office documents.
Well, yeah, it doesn't have to be a Word doc. It's any document, because we've seen exploits where someone will send you a picture and the extension looks right, but it's actually a document or an executable.
Right.
Well, and that leads us to this Windows 0-day MS-HTML attack.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of words in there to unpack.
Right. How not to get booby trapped.
Yes. Yeah. So this is a great article. And you know what? I think you can't shake a stick and say MS-HTML attack without finding a website that right now is talking about this, because it's such a big deal. But
holy crap, the CVE number is 40,000. We've jumped up 20,000 CVEs just in the last 10 minutes.
It's awesome. It's fantastic. But if you take a look at the link we'll post is on nakedsecurity.sophos.com, which is a fantastic write-up and kind of simplifies this bug a little bit. But this one, like you had said, CVE 2021-40444. It is an MS-HTML remote code execution vulnerability. So I'll unpack that a little bit. It's called a 0-day. So for those of you, when we talked about it earlier, if you're just jumping in on this podcast, a 0-day is something that there is not a patch for. There's an exploit out in the wild that is being used that there's no patchable way to stop it. Which makes it sound way scarier. Although it is pretty scary. Yeah. So what this does, this is a Office document, Excel, Word, whatever. And you're going to insert in that document, literally going into opening Word and clicking on insert and inserting a type of thing. Like you can insert a picture or you can insert clip art. You're going to insert what's called an ActiveX control.
And wait a minute. I thought ActiveX controls died with Internet Explorer.
They did, unless you're using Word or Excel. They're still around. So you can still, for apparently backward compatibility to 1994, you can insert an ActiveX control that does things. And there's a bunch of them in there. There's ActiveX controls that are forms that a user can fill out in a Word document. There's ActiveX controls that are tree view browsers, so you can display data.
I don't like my X controls to be active. Let me just put that.
You want the inactive X controls?
I want the inactive controls, otherwise known as static text.
Right. So ActiveX, you're right, is a technology that's gone away on the web. You're not like it used to be. You could find ActiveX controls on websites.
We used to write them.
That would run whatever type of code you wanted. And they were so dangerous there, they took them off websites and decided to leave them in Office.
Yeah. And where they're not dangerous.
Who uses Office?
all the more reasons why you should be using, and I'm not going to call it Office 365 because they've recently changed the branding to Microsoft 365. Did you guys know that? I
did not know that.
Office 365 is no longer a valid moniker.
I thought Microsoft 365 was a level service offering from several years ago that included other things like the business software and stuff like that.
You know, it probably was.
Planes and stuff like that. It used to be, because it was basically you could subscribe to Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 included things like Great Plains and other like business offerings. Wow. So they've gotten rid of that, I guess.
Microsoft likes to reuse monikers.
Yes. You think?
And so the monikers have to come with a date in order for you to understand what they mean.
Remember the .NET servers?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Patrick and I were both Microsoft regional directors in New England, and we had to do demos of them. They sent these big, giant cases of computers and stuff with scripts to our offices. We had to practice on them and run the demos on .NET servers.
I don't think you can find a .NET server today.
I'm sure the Windows team loved that. Anyway, we digress. So I think the gist of this particular MS-HTML remote code execution vulnerability is the same as before, right? Word docs are evil.
Yeah, and this one's interesting because it's an MS-HTML, which is not to get too technical, but it's a control that can load up active HTML, active code,
ActiveX
to do
controls.
things. And it is an ActiveX control that has that MS-HTML. And the real root of the problem here is that MS-HTML control is leveraging core foundations from Internet Explorer, which...
Yikes. Which is an old, outdated, no longer supported, no longer used. You shouldn't ever use it browser.
Exactly.
Yeah, Edge replaced it long ago.
And Edge is actually pretty awesome at finding all of the crazy stuff that hackers try and do. I like Edge a lot. But so it's weird because it's leveraging some really old code in the system. And we've seen this is kind of a common thread with Microsoft, right? I mean, take a look at Print Nightmare. Take a look at, all
they
the
they have 1 million developers, and they're not all doing the same thing. I mean, Microsoft's got it's a mixed bag. Like, for example, Defender is a really good antivirus. And I know Dwayne's got a lot of respect for it, right?
I do. Honestly, Defender's fantastic. Like, so we write a lot of 0 days here. We write a lot of malware that we can use against customers. And
with permission.
Sure.
With their permission.
But the one piece of endpoint detection that we usually have the hardest time with is Defender. They do a fantastic job.
It just occurred to me, Dwayne, it must be very hard for you, like at parties, when somebody introduces you and they say, "What do you do?" And you say, "I write malware."
It is. You do get that cross-eyed stare. I either open with, "I'm a computer hacker,"
or a punch in the face.
Most people just say, "Oh, it can't be that bad." There must be some merit to what you write.
It's probably goodware. It's okay.
It's malware for the forces of good.
Yeah. So,
malware to prevent malware.
Speaking of Defender, so this particular exploit, if you were to leave Word by default, the way it is as Mr. Gates intended when you install it, without touching any options, next, finish, you're protected against this. Because what happens is when you go to open the document, you're going to get that little bar that says, "Do you want to enable active content on this page?"
And always say no.
Right. It's the people who have said, "Never show me this dialogue. I can't be bothered with a single click when I want to see active content on my Word documents." Those people are the ones that will get exploited by this without even knowing. Not clicking on anything, just opening a document.
Because they've already clicked.
So there's another Microsoft story here. Microsoft shares temporary fix for ongoing Office 365 zero-day attacks. And as we said, this is how new this moniker is. Just found out about it today. And this was written 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So the fix involves a couple things. But first off, keeping your settings in Office by default, the way they should be, the default settings, is step number one. Step number two, Defender has right now some pattern matching to try and find this. So yet again, Windows Defender on a fully patched system, odds bet you're not going to get hit by this.
That's cool.
And then on top of that, if you need added security, there are registry settings for those of you who like the registry.
Ooh. Oh, terrible. Around the time of Windows 95, I think that's when the registry started. And it was sort of this great idea to to make a shared database on the system that people could read and find keys and
shared settings
and all that stuff, shared settings, because hard drive space was at a minimum. you wanted to do as much sharing as possible.
Wasn't OLE also defined? There was something in the registry about object reuse.
OLE was before that, and then COM, component object model.
Object is reuse. What really reuse. That was a big motivator.
Yeah, object reuse. Yeah, exactly. And so now, of course, we have so much RAM, we have so much disk space on our typical systems that we don't need to do that. And it turns out that having this single point of failure is really, really a bad idea. Brutal and brittle.
Brutally brittle.
Yes. Anyway, that's what the registry is.
Yeah, but the registry can be useful. So registry settings do have the ability to set up policies for how different types of files are dealt with, depending on what zones they come from.
Yeah, except that the registry is editable.
True. Yeah. So these settings, if the malware gets far enough in, they could change these settings so that they could then download more droppers and malware and all sorts of stuff. So you have to be careful. Least privilege.
I had experiences, and you guys probably have too, where the registry gets corrupted, and you go out on the Googles and the Bings and you say, "Hey, my registry is corrupted," and you get tools that will clean your registry
and your bank account.
And I actually ran one of these because I vetted it a little bit and, found a lot of people saying, no, this one is good. These stay away from these ones. And I found one that was actually pretty good, but what a horror show. If somebody just goes to clean your registry now, it could do anything.
Yeah. You're
really trusting,
like inviting them in your home.
Point. Right. Yeah. Okay. Is that all the Microsoft? Oh, no. What about the Demon Cries?
Demon Cries, story? Unfortunately, is not a Microsoft thing.
It's not a Microsoft
would
thing,
disagree. Fortunately, it's not.
Well, remember we talked about Cisco.
Yes.
And we've talked about Cisco being sort of like the company that makes the boxes that run the internet. Well, Netgear is another company that makes switches and all sorts of things like Cisco does, but I would say Netgear is more used in consumer or prosumer applications. Would that be a good?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment. Netgear, TP-Link, those types of devices.
Yeah.
Yep. Where you'd be able to go to your Best Buy and, grab any one of those off the shelf.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with Netgear today?
With demons?
Demon Cries. Demon's Cries.
Demon's Cries.
Demon's Cries.
Demon's Cries and Draconian Fear. I want to meet the guy who names these things, honestly.
These are vulnerabilities, Draconian Fear. Seventh Inferno is another one. Good Lord.
I think it's the guy who used to write Game of Thrones.
I think you're probably right.
Joe Dante.
So what's fascinating about Demon Cry, Draconian Fear, and Seventh Inferno? So these were vulnerabilities that were discovered, I believe, by a Polish security researcher.
Okay.
And these, in essence, distilled down, give access to certain models of Netgear devices where you can either reset the administrative password or you can gain full administrative control over the devices. So the point here is, you should always constantly be aggregating and watching logs. So logging is super important when we start talking about, enterprise devices, but even at home. Like, I don't know, you guys, I'm gonna ask you a question and I'm fully expecting that you'll lie like I am. But how often do you look at the logs of your routers at your house?
What do you think? I read them like when I'm.
I thought that was your job.
On the toilet.
Sit down with a nice scotch and I read my logs.
It's like, what happened in the news today, honey? Oh, I don't know. I'm reading the logs. It's kind of boring. A lot of the same stuff over and over again.
That's how I intro when I go to parties, Carl. What do you do? What do you do for fun? I sit down with a good log.
I read logs. So, yeah, obviously what you need is something to be reading the logs for you and alerting you when there's something that doesn't smell right.
Exactly. Right. So, and a lot of times you can try and protect yourself by, lots of people say, well, I just block the countries that I know are going to do the hacking.
Oh, great.
And you go, okay, that's fantastic. And then when they
guess you don't want to do business with any of those countries
right.
Or anybody
and
in
then
them.
You say, okay, great. So when that one of those malicious people then goes to Amazon and sets up an Amazon account and decides to pick their data center as, I don't know, Reston.
Right.
Now they're coming from there. Are you going to block there too? Well, probably not. So log reading, log aggregation, understanding what's hitting your devices is super important. Something, like I said, as a security expert, I know I don't do as often as I should.
Right.
No one does.
But secondly would be patching. Again, I feel like I'm the patch guy. I keep saying patch.
You're the patch man, as George Harrison famously sang.
I think I am. There are patches out for this that do fix the exploits here. I did, in cruising the articles on this Netgear, did also see a new breach for TP-Link devices as well. Yet again, same type of thing, which is why I didn't even list it here. Just make sure whatever type of device you're using, you're always on the latest firmware. And if you're like, Patrick, Carl, and I, when a new piece of firmware comes out, you'll then rip it apart, reverse engineer it, see if there's any security exploits that are being added to the new device, and then, implement it if you deem it not risky. Right, guys?
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Did you just say right, Gus?
I said right, guys. Right, Gus.
Oh, right,
guys.
Right, Gus.
That's what we do.
I thought we were on an episode of Psych.
Oh,
I love that show.
Best show ever. Yeah, Psych's fantastic.
It is.
So that's the whole demon world. And the Inferno world is literally, hey, listen, not just Cisco gets hit with these things. TP-Link as well as Netgear all have issues as well. Just make sure you're on the latest versions. And one of the things you should always do is make sure you're taking a look at logs.
I don't know that we've ever looked at a firmware that didn't have some issue.
No, I mean, it's sad. So we do have here, when we're working with customers for a red team opportunity or even some of our blue team stuff, we'll take firmware and we will tear it down to the studs and we'll determine what's in there and see how risky or not risky it is. And I'd say a good firmware that I would recommend to a customer is, this is okay. Usually has about 200 exploits in it.
Yeah, but they're usually in things that you're not going to use, that are on by default.
Right. So, but if you were to get to that device, there's 200 different ways for you to escalate yourself to root or to get access to things you shouldn't or whatever. So it's sad, but firmware it's a black box at this point that I think,
but again, see a lot more people it's not an entry level thing. It's not something that the average techie is going to be able to do.
No. So that's a good point. I mean, for the listeners here, I'm not expecting that the listeners here are going to take that new Netgear patch and go, what have you added, Mr. Netgear? And then rip it apart and try and figure it out. No, it's probably you're safer just a patch. And then the hackers will move on to the next Netgear in the list.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I just posted this little MP3 that my brother and a guy named Steve Kermitas and I did in 2004, November 2004. It's Takeoff on Taxman by the Beatles, Patch Man. And it's in the show notes. What do you think?
I think it's the best song ever.
Let's play a little of it.
Please.
Oh yeah.
That's you know what? That's going to be my new theme song. As I'm walking around, that's just playing in my head.
Was that
constantly?
What was the runtime band on the runtime? Did they play that?
No.
Oh.
This was before Band on the Runtime.
Wow, that should have been one of their songs.
I know.
We should go back and do those kinds of security themed songs.
So awesome.
Yeah. So speaking of giant lists of IP addresses, let's talk about Fortinet.
Have we come to the last thing?
I think we have.
This is it.
Ooh.
This is what you stuck around for, kids.
So Fortinet, for all of you out there who may or may not know, is a firewall device that you can put at your home or business. Lots of businesses running Fortinet, although I will leak on here. Patrick and I are also using Fortinets at the house because, we're looking for enterprise grade security at home. And Fortinet allows you to do all sorts of wonderful things. You can expose services, like you could host a web server. Let's say it's your business. And you could forward on ports to a DMZ, demilitarized zone, that, you can host servers. one of the features of the Fortinet is to have a VPN. Now, for most of you out there, you probably have heard of VPNs, but it's a virtual private network. So you could VPN from anywhere in the world back to your business or your house if you had a Fortinet there, and have secure encrypted access to your house, which is really nice.
And be like, it's like you're there.
Right. Absolutely. But unfortunately, due to previous Fortinet hacks that have been out there, there are 500,000 usernames and passwords and IP addresses for Fortinet VPNs that exist out there that was leaked by a threat actor known as Orange, who's the administrator of the newly launched Ramp hacking forum. 500,000 IP addresses, usernames, and passwords to valid VPNs.
Wow. So I encourage you, and we encourage you, if you use Fortinet, to go to this link and do a search on your IP address.
Yeah, you'll see that definitely in the show notes. There was a link to this GitHub account called Crypto Cipher, where what they've done is that particular user has taken the raw list of open VPNs with usernames and passwords, has stripped out the usernames and passwords, and just listed the IPs.
Well, that was responsible.
Yeah.
Of him.
So you now can go in there, take a look, and see if your number is in there.
Yeah. Sort of a mini have I been pwned.
Yeah.
Sort of a reverse lottery.
Yeah. You lose.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
I have all 4 octets. You lose.
Yeah. Aw. I searched for mine as soon as it came out. I was super interested to see if mine was breached.
I did too, and I don't even have Fortinet.
It's always good.
And strangely, you did come up.
Yeah, weird.
Well, guys, that's another depressing show about the state of security this week.
We're doing it right.
What else?
Yeah.
I guess we're doing it right. Got to keep laughing, but patch.
Yes, and listen to the song while you do it.
Yeah, and don't open any email attachments unless you're sure.
Ever. Not even if you're sure, just don't open them. Just leave them be. Just let them sit there.
All right. I like that. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
That's good. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Right. Patch on. Hey, thanks for listening. You know, you can find us on Twitter at SecurityThisWK and on Instagram at SecurityThisWeek. And we're also working on a Facebook page and a Patreon page. But of course, you can find all of these episodes wherever you get podcasts and at securitysthisweek.com.